Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
Good evening, students, parents, and faculty. It is our honor to welcome you to TEDxYouth at St. Mark's School. My name is Gina.
I'm Crystal.
And I'm Jackie. And we are the organizers of this event. TEDx is an initiative created in the spirit of TED's overall mission to research and discover ideas worth spreading. This is the first official TEDxYouth event and only the second TEDx event since 2015. You might have seen the two words, thinking big, around campus, but what does it mean?
Our theme, Thinking Big, aligns with St. Mark's School motto, Intentionally Small, Thinking Big. It embraces the idea of taking bold actions and dreaming big. As us, organizers, over a year of planning and leadership have transformed our vision into reality. This event is very special to us, and we hope you too can share our excitement.
Tonight, we bring you 5 students from the St. Mark's community to speak on a wide variety of topics. In your hands, you can find the event program. During each talk, please make sure your cell phones are silenced and refrain from flash photography. Sit back, relax, and join us on a ride through great speech and ideas worth spreading.
Have you ever had to make a confession? Let us welcome our first speaker, Diya Bhaireddy, a sophomore at St. Mark's School from Acton, Massachusetts, to confess her secrets and reflections as a twin.
Hi everyone, my name is Diya, and I have a confession to make. I did something that I may or may not regret, and it happened when I was in 7th grade. It was after school. My twin sister and I had just come home. Now, earlier in the week at school, my sister and I had both run for the same elected student council position at our school. And on that very day, she had received the position instead of me. And so when we went home, without her knowing, I went straight to her bed and I poured water all over it. Now, 7th grade me thought this was a heinous crime, something that my parents would quite literally send me to jail for, and the reason that they or my sister never found out was because immediately after, I dried it all up with paper towels. But what drove me to act this way? Sure, it was anger, a temper, but foremost, anxiety. Comparison, to be specific. It was the magnitude of ways in which we'd been pitted against each other. On paper, but in my mind, was where it affected me most. Why do I compare myself to others? Why don't I feel happy when I do? What was wrong with me? There it is. That was exactly what happened that day in our room. So it all starts with a little something called insecurity. Now, everyone in this room knows what this is, as everyone in this room has had it through some point in their lives, but for a purpose of understanding, I'll define it. It's the uncertainty or anxiety about oneself, a lack of confidence. It's the feeling of not being good enough. So, to put it into perspective, imagine yourself on a luxurious cruise ship, but you have a fear of the ocean. You're not equipped to be on that ship. Can you enjoy it at all? Do you feel safe, secure, confident? How I felt in my situation that I described to you was the opposite of those three words. My cruise ship, the situation I should have been able to enjoy, was my sister's win. The moment she came running to me, smiled, thrilled that she had won. I should have been happy for her. But my fear of the ocean, or in this case, my insecurity, prevented me from feeling safe, secure, or confident. Growing up with the twin sister meant that insecurity would constantly be catching me. Other people, they seemed to think that my sister and I were two carbon copies of the same person, and well, judging by this picture up here, I can kind of see why. Yet, even with that, it always felt like they were deeming one of us better than the other. When relatives and distant family members saw us again after seeing us when we were babies, they would stand us side by side and point out all of our differences. Your sister is taller, her teeth are straighter, but you have your mom's nose. Thank you? I didn't really get it. My parents also had unintentionally contributed to these comparisons. Now, I'm not going to rip them apart, as they are sitting in the audience today and are still my parents. But growing up, I always considered myself the more difficult child out of the two of us. Things were always a little bit harder with me. And when disciplining me or trying to explain something, they would often bring up my significantly more well-behaved sister and provide her as an example for me to follow. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my parents so much, and they've always affirmed that my sister and I are our own people, free to make our own choices. Yet, when the two of us were compared in those disciplinary situations, I couldn't help feeling like instead of trying to fit better into my own shoes, another pair of a completely different size was thrown at me. These examples that I've provided you so far have just been some that I've gone through in my personal experience being a twin. Of course, these struggles and insecurities can be found in way more places than just a sibling relationship. For example, being someone part of the minority in a predominantly white school. Yes, I have felt singled out. And so many more people in this room can relate to this, but as a teen, being in the age where material possessions and social status are superior, I'm always asking my parents for the trendiest new jacket or shoes, and sometimes I look at girls I don't even know, and I just think, I would do anything to be you, even if it's just for a day. That's all any of us feel in situations like these. To become the majority, or to become what is liked. Going off of that theme of superiority, I found that the word better is objective. It's an opinion. Everyone has their own perception of the word when it applies in different scenarios. My sister winning the election was proof that she was better than me, and well, that was a fact. She got the most votes, meaning that people liked her speech the most. I realized I needed to try my hardest to become better and take her example. And just like that, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I needed a new personality. Now, if you're a teen or you've been around a Gen Z person before, you might have heard the term glow up. Parents in the audience, maybe you've helped your child give their room a glow up, which basically just means getting them a new rug and helping them take down the princess posters from when they were 5, but you get the idea. it's a makeover, giving something new qualities, or just sprucing it up even just a little bit. I wanted to give my personality a glow up. And well, my sister was the blueprint. I mean, if it worked for her, why shouldn't it work for me? And studies from UC Davis show that by making these changes, they can result in success and changes in policy and effect. I wanted all of that for myself. And so, well, my sister doesn't know about this. Now that I think about it, there's a lot of things she's finding out tonight. But I observed her behavior for a week, and I acted with her personality for a week, and I made this graph of my approximations. I wrote it down in one of my journals and turned it into a graph. So we have 3 different categories here. First one is the friends that I talk to. My personality is in blue, my sister's is in the red. On average in a day, I talk to about 5 friends. When I acted with my sister's personality, I talked to 8 friends. Second category, how long I talk to my parents. On average in a day, I talk to them for about 60 minutes, an hour. With my sister's personality, I talk to them for an hour and a half, 90 minutes. And the last category, the marks I received in school, in a week on average, I received a 92. With my sister's personality, I received a 94. So from what we're looking at here, my life was going great. I was succeeding, as trustee UC Davis said. There was nothing going wrong. But there's always a but. There was still something wrong. This way I was acting, it wasn't me. Even though I looked different on the outside, even though I acted different on the outside and looked different to other people, I was still the same person on the inside. Nothing had changed. And this way I was acting, it led to even more doubts and insecurities. Well, if these results were what I'm getting with my sister's personality, does that mean that she's actually better than me in more aspects than just the election? Is there actually something wrong with me? I needed to know why, and I really hoped it wasn't true. I was tired of acting like my sister, and I wanted to give being myself another shot. But I knew I had to do it differently this time. I had to understand why I felt the way I did when I lost the election to her, and why it led to me having my anxious spurt. And so, let me tell you the 2 things that I learned about a post-rejection mindset. I have a question for you all in the audience. How many of you drive like a car? Okay, a good amount of you. Now, getting a little bit more personal, how many of you have ran a red light before? A couple. I know you certainly have. It's my dad, by the way. But, okay, so a good amount of you. So your reason for doing so is probably, oh, I was running late for work, I wasn't watching, right? But without knowing any of that, what would your reaction be if someone else was running the red light? Not the same, right? Oh, they're careless. They don't know what they're doing. They drive just like my mom when she's late to her hair appointment. True story, by the way. So what I just told you is an example of something called self-serving bias, and that's the bias that our own selves are never in the wrong. We always blame our failures on an outlying factor. In my own situation, I blame my failure on the fact that, on the fact that they couldn't have 2 twins in the same role. It just wasn't fair to other kids. In that thought, what it all came down to was self-esteem. Self-esteem allows for confidence and security in your own abilities. The more of it you have, the less likely you are to blame your failures on something else to satisfy yourself, because you are already content. I wasn't confident with the outcome that I had received, and so I didn't take personal responsibility for maybe my own possible shortcomings that I didn't win, and instead, I blamed the system for being the reason that I didn't win. It matters how close your relationship with reality is. If your expectations in life are generally aligning with the outcome that you receive, you're less likely to disappoint yourself. So maybe it's a matter of changing those expectations to better suit what you need now. So now that you know you're guilty of self-serving bias because you all just confirmed you're hypocrites when you drive, let me tell you how to change that. When we're in the face of anxiety, we don't ever think about more than one perspective, right? We're either focusing completely about ourselves and obsessing, or it's the same with another person, our opponent. We're obsessing completely over them. But remember that everyone is on the same playing field. My opponents in the election, they had a reason for wanting the same thing that I did. My sister and other competitors, they all wanted to make a positive impact in our community if they were elected. But don't forget to affirm yourself as well. You yourself have a reason for wanting that thing too. My reason to be elected was just as valid as theirs. So the first thing about a post-rejection mindset, which is being fair to yourself. I have a little story for you. So it was during the winter of 2020 when I was applying to various prep schools, just like St. Mark's. And, I was interviewing with these schools, writing essays. I was under immense pressure. Though I wasn't physically faced with my competition very much, I still very much felt its presence. People bring pressure, and COVID-19 was the first time in my life when I wasn't surrounded by people. In my time away from school, I rediscovered my love for reading, and I reread the Harry Potter books after so long. The way that J.K. Rowling had made her own fantasy world entirely, with hundreds of her own spells, foods, concepts, settings. Her visions were so clear that 8 record-breaking movies could be made, and theme parks for people to get to know what it's really like to live inside that world. I desperately wanted to go to Universal to experience it, but COVID was in the way. And so, I found a way to visit the places that I wanted to visit without leaving my room. This method is called shifting. To further explain, shifting your reality is a way to transport your conscience to another world or universe entirely. It normally happens when you're sleeping or under some sort of trance, kind of like lucid dreaming. And for those of you who don't know, lucid dreaming is being aware that you are dreaming. Yet, shifting is different in the way that it's completely real, where you can feel sensations and remember memories. I can see some of you looking at me like I'm crazy, and well, I was, but let's be real here, it was 2020, so did I really have anything better to do? So, I did crazy things when I was trying to shift, let's be honest. I drank gallons of water and I listened to the Harry Potter theme every single night before going to bed, hoping that it would get me closer to Hogwarts for some reason. After watching numerous tutorials on how to shift, there was one thing that the makers of those tutorials kept reiterating, and that was the fact that you have to reprogram your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind is that part of your mind that guides all of your automatic motions. The things you can do, the things you don't have to think about. For example, I can walk up the stairs. I know I can do that, and I don't have to convince myself that I can do that every single time I go to do it. This part of your mind carries everything that you don't have to think about, right? But believe it or not, it's actually what makes learning new things harder. Why does my experience of reality shifting even matter to this talk? Well, this action of reprogramming your subconscious mind is what I had to do if I wanted my troubles lifted. I had to start thinking differently about the way that other people saw me. And that changed my world entirely. We are in control of our own actions, and we have that control to change the way we think about things too, just as I did. All this time, I was trying to become a version of better that wasn't my own definition, which is why my efforts to become so weren't authentic. You're probably still wondering about that graph that I showed you earlier, comparing my sister's personality and my personality. Is she really better than me? And the answer to that question is no. She's not better than me. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it to come out like that. Sister watching, I'm sorry, but no, she's not better than me. Neither of us are better than each other. But the thing that set my sister apart from me was that she acted with confidence. She knew her worth, right? If I had known that at that point in my life, I would have received the same results as well. It's all a matter of confidence. There's one crucial perspective change that we must undergo, and here it is. Instead of asking, why them? Instead ask, why me? The last thing I did in my anxious situation was finally to transform the focus to myself. All this time I was asking, why was my sister chosen? Instead I asked, why was I chosen? Because I'm capable of failure. I'm capable of making changes. I'm capable of learning. When we dwell in our insecurity and ask the question of why our opponents are always receiving the positive outcome, what does that give us? We start naming all the things we could have done different, but most of the time, those things are negative. When we change the focus to ourselves, we find only positive things. Karly Sodas, activist and author, says in her own TEDxYouth talk, "We are afraid to be ourselves because we are afraid we are not good enough." If we were made to mimic one model human with the same looks and the same actions, then we would be made to be like that. But we aren't. So let's do what we were supposed to. This last bit to wrap up isn't really part of my two-part solution to post-rejection mindset, but I just wanted to say this. Here's the secret. Get close. You can never really escape rejection or comparison. The only thing you can do is escape being negatively affected by them. You're going to find uncomfort wherever you go in life. It's inevitable. The one thing you can do is really think about how you handle it. Maybe now you'll stop and think before you pour water on a friend's bed. Thank you so much.
Our second speaker tonight is a seasoned baseball player. But how does baseball connect with disappointment, a good laugh, and canoeing? Liam Childs, a sophomore at St. Mark's School, is here to talk about how you can laugh even when you give up a home run.
Can you remember the first time you felt disappointment or something didn't go your way? How did you respond? The first distinct memory I have of disappointment happened when I was 8. I'd broken my finger a few weeks earlier, but my hand felt as good as new. Playing in the championship game of my youth baseball league was all that mattered to me at the time. I was a pretty good hitter at that age, and I begged the coach, who was, coincidentally, also my father, to pinch hit me in the bottom of the last inning. He refused, we lost, and I threw a temper tantrum, one of the worst ways to respond to disappointment. What can I say? I was 8, but to this day, I'm still passionate about baseball, so I can at least understand why I became so emotional. Too many people respond to disappointment and adversity in a similar way to my childish manner when I was 8. I understand that things may not always go your way in life. As the Buddhists say, life is suffering. But the individuals that respond better to disappointment and adversity are going to end up leading happier and more successful lives. So that's why I'm here to speak with you today. In my short life, what concrete measures do I take to improve my outlook as I go through daily ups and downs? As I mentioned, I'm a pitcher. This is me pitching when I was young. And it's very interesting to play this position because the whole game can essentially be controlled by the pitcher, from the speed and tempo of the game to where the ball is thrown, impacting where it goes, if it is hit at all. so this can be a lot of pressure on a pitcher. From a young age, I quickly realized that yelling at my fielders or throwing my glove when a run scored was far less conducive to a positive outcome on the next pitch than getting the ball back and accepting what had happened. A few years ago, I did a workshop led by Dr. Tom House, a former Major League Baseball pitcher who has since started the National Pitching Association. He took this idea of moving on to the next level when he said, when someone hits a home run off you, turn around and laugh into your glove. Turn around and laugh. This was very counterintuitive to me at the time. I was used to being somewhat dejected and demoralized when someone got a hit off me. So to take it as far as laughing was not something I was initially comfortable with. Of all the sports, baseball is truly a game of failure. Where else can you fail 7 out of 10 times and still make it to the Hall of Fame with a 300 lifetime batting average? In sports, especially team sports, there's a widespread expectation that you need to succeed every single time or else you let your team down. Now, this is not entirely bad. It can lead to motivation to work hard off the field or to give it your all while you're playing. But to take it as far as becoming visibly upset while playing is not helpful to anybody. Too many times I've seen players go from having a perfectly good game to looking like they've never touched a baseball in their lives, simply because they struck out. To put a strikeout in perspective, Aaron Judge, who hit more home runs than anyone else this past season, had 100 more strikeouts than he did home runs. To succeed at the highest level, not just in sports, but anywhere in life, you must accept that you are going to fail, and you are going to fail a lot. But why did Tom House say that one should laugh after giving up a home run? When you're stressed or angry, your body releases stress hormones. The main one being cortisol, which puts you in a state known as fight or flight. Imagine you're a caveman 100,000 years ago, and you've just come face to face with a mountain lion. How would you respond? If you say, I wonder what the best way to deal with this situation is, bam, you're dead. If you either attack or run away, you have a much higher chance of survival. And the cavemen that did this were the ones that lived long enough to have children, who had children, and so on and so forth. We are alive today because a long time ago, an ancestor of ours acted with instinct when facing a stressful situation. The survivors are the ones who put their energy into their muscles, not their brains when experiencing stress. However, most of the stress we face on a day-to-day basis needs to be reasoned out, not beaten away. When you laugh or smile, your body releases endorphins, which counteract the effects of the cortisol. They lower your heartbeat, calm you down, and give control back to your mind. Even if you do not give a genuine laugh or smile, just by moving the muscles around your mouth in the way you would if you were actually smiling, tricks your brain into releasing these endorphins. Stress can come about in many different ways, not just from mountain lions, but I get the impression that our world today is far less upbeat than the world I hear about my parents growing up in. I attribute much of that to smartphones and technology. While all of our technology can have real benefits, there are also costs associated with their prevalence. The adolescent and societal saturation in social media and our cell phones impacts our ability to think and be aware of ourselves. As Stoic philosopher and Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius once said, life's happiness is dependent on the quality of your thoughts. However, most of the thoughts and opinions that enter our minds are not ones we've had ourselves, rather something we watched a TikTok or a YouTube video on. If we are constantly focused on comparing ourselves to others or doom scrolling immersed in the negative and often violent events of the day, it's easy to see how one could lose control of their own inner compass, leaving them more anxious and stressed out. Statistics I found on the CDC website show that adolescents with extremely high cell phone usage showed a much greater risk for suicidal ideation compared with those who are general users, and that there's been a significant increase in suicide rates since the year 2000, with the primary jumps occurring after the release of the iPhone in 2007. In our modern world, most of the problems that we deal with on a day-to-day basis are best resolved with well-thought-out ideas and some perspective on the situation. That's the point Tom House is making, that a good laugh will put some perspective on a stressful environment. As a pitcher, rather than getting stuck, focused on the negative aspects of a situation, simply smiling will get me ready to face the next batter. If our thoughts towards our lives impacts our experience of it, and we want to find the middle ground between happiness and disappointment, let's return to my theme of perspective in baseball. It's very difficult to throw a ball exactly where you want it to go if your muscles are tensed and prepared for a fight. In fact, it may even cause a fight if it leads you to throw a ball into the batter's ribs. The key is, in order to be successful and not have your stress hormones running the show, you need not be focused on failing, but on being present in the moment. Tom House and the Stokes have it right. Your thoughts towards your experience make a big difference. As a pitcher, rather than getting stuck, focused on the negative aspects of a situation, simply smiling will get me ready to face the next batter. Once I let go of the ball, I have no control over what happens next. I can do everything I can to be prepared to give my best performance, but once the ball is pitched, I truly need to let go of my worries about what is going to happen and just be ready to meet the moment, wherever the ball goes. In psychology, there's something known as a flow state, commonly known as being in the zone, where there's a sense of connection between your mind and your body. Time feels like this slowed down and you are completely present in your experience. For example, before you throw a pitch, you might step off the pitching rubber to think about what you're going to throw and what happened on the previous pitch, but when you step back on the rubber, you aren't thinking about anything. You don't hear the crowd or the other team yelling. You're just in the moment, executing the pitch to the best of your abilities. Baseball's provided me with an incredible vehicle for experiencing life fully, from the joys of success to the depths of failure and everything in between. My hope for you is that you find a similar type of vehicle for yourself, where you become fully engaged, giving you a full range of experiences. I've talked a lot about sports, but let me finish with a story that truly brought home the importance of how a change in mindset can be a catalyst for a change in reality. It was the latter half of a multi-week whitewater canoe trip to the northern regions of Ontario and Quebec. It was the third day of consistent, steady rain. Our boats drew near a campsite after dozens of miles of paddling and portaging. It was clear the morale of the group was low as we had the daunting task of gathering soaking wood just to struggle to start a fire for another night in a row. Our two trip leaders, probably feeling just as dreary as the rest of us, energetically told us to be efficient in our chores so we could eat and get to bed as soon as possible. As I took a deep breath to prepare to jump into the cold, waist-deep water to pull my boat ashore, I yelled at the top of my lungs, "I love this." Although mildly sarcastic at first, I yelled it again and again and again. As I yelled, a sense of acceptance came over me. I was okay. I was healthy and able-bodied, and I had dinner and sleep waiting for me after a physical day. As I looked out at the beauty of the woods, I realized I was happy. In the nights prior, I'd been miserable as I slowly stooped down to pick up and collect the wood. This night was different. I felt comfortable in a way I hadn't before. I was quite wet and in an undesirable situation, but unhappiness could not change that predicament. It could only make it worse. That night, I got my firewood faster than I ever had before. My situation had not changed at all. My perspective had. Our happiness is not based on rain or sun. It's how we think about the rain or sun. Our happiness is not based on things happening around us. It's based on what we make of them. As Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. And don't forget, if you give up a home run in life, laugh at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Liam. Presenting a vulnerability of yours in front of an audience is never easy, yet our next speaker will be doing just that. Let us welcome Delin Liu, a junior at St. Mark's School from Qingdao, China, to share his story of embracing vulnerability and finding passion in music.
Now, before I start, I want to show you guys a graph here. So you see, this was my work pattern back when I was a freshman in high school. I tended to start my essay 24 hours before the assignment was due. Yeah, I got my work done in time, but I was a master procrastinator. Now, many of us have definitely faced a similar issue as mine, or not, in this room, when it comes to a big essay, a lab report, or whatever big assignment you're working on. But do we ever ask ourselves the question, why do we do that? Why do we procrastinate? Well, I do, and I'll call this a moment of human vulnerability. Vulnerability refers to a mental state where you're afraid to your exposure to potential harm, whether it's physical, emotional, or psychological. Now, such thing as procrastination, I will call it a vulnerability because it is a fear of failure. We as humans are afraid of failing at a specific task or goal when success is measured so heavily as a parameter against personal growth. Now, let me ask you a couple of questions. Can I see a show of hands right now for how many of you have tried to hide vulnerability like that one in your life before? Wow. And can I see a show of hands for how many of you have tried to embrace and talk about your vulnerability with people before? Not too many, huh? Now let's analyze our results here. If you say that you have tried to put yourself in a position to lock up your vulnerability and identity, you're telling me that you're afraid of your weaknesses. And that is absolutely normal. That is human instinct, right? That is who we are. But that also means you're not making connections in life, because embracing your vulnerability can help you to build interpersonal connection and intimacy in society today. Now, some of you have raised your hand when I ask if you have ever embraced your vulnerability. And ask yourself the question right now, what does that even mean to you? What was the situation like? What have you gained from it? Well, for me, that means your willingness to make mistakes and to embrace your true self. And finally, make yourself a better person after all, right? Yeah, doesn't it sound super scary that when you try to open up to your vulnerability, it will allow others to attack you? It's a sacrifice of your comfort, of your ego. But I'm here today to tell you that it's absolutely okay to be vulnerable in life, to feel that danger inside of you. And to embrace your vulnerability will just feel like allowing yourself to be a potential prey out there for a hungry tiger that is constantly looking for your weakness and trying to hunt you down. And I would argue that this process will only make you stronger. And it will only allow you to find your voice in life. What do I mean by that? Finding your voice can mean, for me standing up here right now to talk to you about my past vulnerability in a second, or for you all to embrace your emotions in the future, to recognize your imperfections, your limitations, to know yourself better. So ask yourself the question right now, who am I? What is my vulnerability? And please be honest, because this answer is only to you. As you're thinking about this, let me tell you a personal story so you can understand me better. I came to the United States at a very young age for a middle school education, and the first thing I have to do is to cover a twin XL size mattress cover with a twin size bed sheet. Yeah, it didn't work out too well in the dorm. I tried to put it on, but it didn't work. So I spent my first night in my dorm room on the sofa in the common room, because it was better than a mattress cover. Now that might sound like a super silly story to you, right? Why am I telling this? But that was what my life was like when I first got here. I was confused. I was trying to get used to a new culture, new language, perhaps a new lifestyle. So far, trying to fit in, I started playing football and basketball in my 6th and 7th grade year. I know, I look very different from now. I wasn't too good at it, actually. So in my first basketball game, I could still remember intercepting the ball from the opponent and scoring right ahead. I was jumping up and down so happily because it was my first goal of the season. But yet, when I turned around, I look at my teammate. They were all shaking their heads. Why? Because I scored in my own basket. Anyway, trying to fit in such a way and meeting new people on the sports field and in the classroom, I had a lot of fun. But some part of me was missing, and I couldn't tell what it was. Now, you're probably expecting a very cliche story about listening to a speech, watching a movie, and finding my identity, but no, I did that in the shower. Like most teenagers, I like to sing the song I listen to in the shower, but I do it a bit differently. When I say sing, I mean murmuring with a really low volume, so that I don't find people judging me on what I listen to. In 2019, when Taylor Swift was still a huge hit, I know it's debatable, but I tended to sing her love story all the time in the shower. And I do it like this. I know I could be out of tune sometimes, but my roommates always walks into the shower, asks me if there was a mosquito with me. Obviously, he thought that my singing voice was like a mosquito. So I told him there was. There we go, middle of December, up in New Hampshire, when the heater in the bathroom is not working, he walks into the shower with a can of bug spray. Telling me every time after getting out of the shower how bug spray really works in the shower. I don't know what was that about, but... So, in my 8th grade year, actually, I joined the choir. I had my first official singing experience, not like this one. It first brought me to the realm of the musical world, but some of the songs we sang I could hardly remember. I have learned through that experience to use my voice to present a song. And it was my first time singing, and I was mesmerized by this. So what does singing mean to me? Why am I telling you all this? Let's put ourselves in the context of my middle school. I know, we had a beautiful campus, but it was super cold in the winter, all-boys school, up in New Hampshire. Everybody was super good at either basketball, hockey, lacrosse, or skiing. Yeah, it doesn't sound like a super artistic school to me, doesn't it? So for me to feel passionate about music, singing in particular, became a vulnerability of me. I was concerned that what if people look at me differently and judge me on my passion because it was different from what everybody else loved. So I felt depressed. I was feeling refined. I was feeling confined. And whenever I get into a situation like this, I like to talk to people. I went up to my advisor at the time. He gave me a very important lesson, perhaps one that can still impact me until today. He talked to me about his experience in being considered a nerd in high school and college for majoring in history and English literature. And I was surprised how he fought through that judgment and became a successful middle school teacher. I was motivated. I thought about it. Why couldn't I just do the same thing? To keep on doing what I have passion for, right? Isn't that what everybody wants to do? So for my first attempt, I started a band called The Nebula in my 9th grade year. Now people ask me why the name is like that. I never told them the truth because the truth was a bunch of middle schoolers trying to come up with a cool band name, but decided to use a random word generator at the last second. Now having to get that name through such a way, we attended seasonal concert and coffee houses that was at our school. I could still remember very clearly before my first performance, a student came up to me saying that my singing voice sucks. It was the worst that he had ever heard, and my enunciation as a singer would make my voice sound terrible, as always. Having to receive that judgment before my performance, I walked up on the stage. My hand felt really, really clammy right before it. My heart was pounding, and I was almost going to faint out. There's one thing I gotta admit to you. I can still feel the same way up until this day. Even right now, my hands are moist. But it seems to me that the more I have performed in front of people, the more used to it I am. So the more I have embraced my vulnerability, the more comfortable I am when doing it. The song we did was a Coldplay song called Everglow. I know, I looked very passionate back there. And it did not surprise me after the conversation before this performance that a student came up to me saying that I was a weirdo for wearing suits to performance and for performing pop songs. There we go. This is a moment that I would call it a mental breakdown. Sorry, more like this. Now, such a moment, psychologists would argue it as a spiritual rebirth. A big twist there, huh? Let me explain to you why is that. Sitting in the backstage, staring at the piano, after the performance, I was devastated. I thought that was the wrong idea to even start the band in the first place. I felt horrible exposing my vulnerability in front of a group of people because they didn't seem to like it. So I was depressed. I was walking back to my dorm. My head were down, but a group of students came up to me and patted on my shoulder. They said that my performance was excellent. And they loved it. They loved the song options. They loved my voice. I was thinking, wow, did they really mean it that way? Or are they just saying it to comfort me down? Because I looked depressed. But it was thereafter that I realized that we as humans are not perfect. We're inherently fallible. As such, incapable of garnering every possible advantage that the world has to offer us. So there always comes a time when we need to appreciate the recognition from others and see it as a compliment. Yet that night, I exposed my vulnerability. I found judgments and opinions on me, but I also found connections. The type of connection that will impact me until today to keep pursuing this passion of saying. I found people who also share similar experiences as me when it comes to performing a song. Now here I am in high school, performing in a cappella and hosting coffee houses regularly. Singing has become a hobby of mine that I'm more confident about. I have learned to grow away from the judgments and opinions and grow from them. I've yet to see it as a chance of personal growth and opportunity to become a better version of myself. Now, let's take a pause here. I think we have enough listening to my story about becoming a confident singer. Think about what I have really accomplished tonight. I've been constantly exposing my vulnerability, whether it's being a master procrastinator in my freshman year, or if it's scoring a basketball in my own basket, or if it's saying in the shower, or if it's having a passion for singing overall. And you might wonder, why am I doing this? My answer would be because I have learned that these shame, these fears inside of me will keep me going. It is a chance for me to grow as a person. Just like me, people often hide away from their vulnerability and break away from their inner voices to avoid the judgment of others. But I would say that please see vulnerability not as a core of humiliation nor fear, but rather as a cradle for joy, creativity, belonging, and growth. Tell yourself to accept compliments in life with humbleness and to embrace vulnerability with gratitude so that you can find your voice and yourself within it. Believe in yourself that by doing so, maybe one day in the future, you will get to know yourself better after all. Doesn't that sound cool? Don't we want to all know ourselves better? Your strength and weaknesses, what truly matters to you, those are the things you're going to learn by embracing your vulnerability. And to reach such a level of self-awareness and introspection, you'll be able to set yourself successful life goals, effective strategies to meet these goals, step by step with a big rising mentality. And ultimately, we hope that by embracing our vulnerability, we can become successful in our endeavors. Now, before I end, I've been talking about having a passion for singing all along. and as one of my vulnerabilities, but we haven't heard my voice yet. So I'm gonna do a little thing for you. I'm gonna present a part from my favorite song, Supermarket Flowers by Ed Sheeran. This is a song where Ed Sheeran himself as an artist exposed his vulnerability as he describes his fond experience living with his passed away grandmother. And I hope today for me to present this song in front of you, maybe one day in the future, you'll find yourself to embrace your vulnerability. I took the supermarket flash from the windowsill. I threw the day-old from the cup. Packed up the photo album Matthew had made, memories of a life that's been loved. Took the get well soon cars and stuffed animals, poured the old ginger beer down the sink. Dad always told me, don't you cry when you're down, but Mom, there's a tear every time that I blink. Oh, I'm in pieces, it's tearing me up, but I know a heart that's broke is a heart that's been loved. So I sing hallelujah. You were an angel in the shape of my mom. When I fell down, you be there holding me up. Spread your wings as you go. When God takes you back, you'll say hallelujah, you are home. Thank you.
Voice is a power, a tool to fight against injustices and censorship. Our next speaker, Darius Wagner, a senior at St. Mark's School from Brooklyn, New York, will tell us when it's time to lift our voice.
Okay, so I want to start off with a quick game, and the rules are simple. Raise your hand if you believe something is woke. Keep your hand down if you think it isn't. First topic, M&Ms. Lightyear, the Disney movie. The US military. Lego. Terminator, The Dark Fate. The Bernstein Bears, a children's book. The live-action remake of The Little Mermaid. So these are all things that have been described in a negative connotation as woke because they include or tell stories about women, people of color, or LGBTQ individuals. And these are things that so many people tell us today that this is something we should be fearful of, that these very ordinary stories about very ordinary people are a threat to liberty, to the American way of life, and worst of all, a threat to the children. So when did we begin to think this? So this woke thing must have a very terrifying definition. So I found one that is unbiased, that's not found in the media, mainstream, social, left, right, or center. I found one that's in the court of law. Lawyers for the governor of the state of Florida defined woke in court as, quote, the belief there are systemic injustices in American society and the need to address them. That's not that scary. I thought this was a threat to children. So instead of being fearful of something that people are told is fundamentally un-American, they're fearful of something that defines the very story of America, such as standing up against injustice and fighting for equity and equal opportunity. While this may seem silly, the provocative rhetoric behind wokeness has immensely damaging consequences. From the books we read, to the history we tell, to the rise in hate crimes, what makes our nation, the very fabric of our nation, is being shredded. And under the disguise of terms of things like parental rights, critical race theory, and indoctrination, the most vulnerable populations in our society are being targeted. Terms like critical race theory is used to describe any and everything involving race. The term indoctrination is used to rile up anger and political support. The term groomer is used to target the LGBTQ community, which leads to a rise in violence. And the term wokeness is masqueraded around to deflect from any societal injustice. Because, you see, it's not about protecting America, as many like to say, or protecting the American way of life. It's really simple. It's about protecting power. Because, you see, when you love something or someone, you tell them the truth. And the truth is, I love America, even when it feels like America doesn't love me. But America was founded off the backs of violence, oppression, and suppression. And from that founding, there are still systemic impacts that create inherent unequal opportunities. Because today, where you are born in America, your race, your gender, your socioeconomic status, your ethnicity, and so much more defines where you will start in America and whether or not you will have the resources to succeed in America. You see, and admitting that means in a position of power, you should do all that you can do to remedy these historical wrongs and do the right thing. But it's clear that teaching about history, our identities, and the modern day implications of said history challenges political agendas. From good education, to criminal justice, to voting rights, to maternal health, to reproductive health, to housing, and to so much more, all these issues have roots in our history and need to be addressed. But to see here, admitting that is not some controversial statement that's meant to push an agenda, it's the truth. And you see, when many people would rather uphold the privileges and advantages that they have in society, rather than confront this issue with basic empathy and decency. And instead of confronting it with truth and facts and emotion, we're given culture wars that distract from the realities of an unequal society. And a broken system remains just that, broken. You see, as a result, the voices that make up this beautiful, diverse mosaic of a country of different people and backgrounds become silenced. Who in here today feels like their voice holds no power? By show of hands. I see you back there. If that's the case, then why are so many people telling you this is something you should fear? Then why are so many people trying to take our voice away? Books that talk about the very real experience of LGBTQ Americans, of women, of people of color, and people of different faith are being banned. History that teaches lessons about race, gender, or anything outside of American exceptionalism is being nixed from lessons plans. And conversations that helps us become more tolerant and understanding are being restricted in the classroom. NPR reports that in 2021, in 35 states, there were over 137 different bills introduced across the country restricting what teachers can teach regarding American history, politics, race, and gender. And that makes no mistake that this was after the year where racial justice was brought to the forefront of American society. One of these bills is in Texas, called Senate Bill 3. ABC News reports that SB 3 can cut public education requirements on lessons like Martin Luther King, the Civil Rights Movement, white supremacy, and the women's suffrage movement. And these laws have very real effects because in Southlake, Texas, teachers were told that if they give a book that discusses the experience of the Holocaust, they need to give a book teaching an opposing perspective. Are you serious? An opposing perspective. Imagine that. Another one of these bills in 2022 is Florida, HB 1557, also known as the Don't Say Gay bill, a bill that bans discussions around gender identity and sexual orientation in grades K through 3. A bill that's designed to, quote, protect children, targets LGBTQ youth who are most likely to be susceptible to bullying, depression, and suicidal ideation. It enforces these harmful tropes that you're not born gay or trans, that you're taught it, that it's not natural and that's not normal. God forbid a kid mentions his Christmas holiday with his two dads. God forbid a teacher talks about her Hanukkah traditions with her wife. God forbid a student who feels attraction to someone of the same gender has those feelings validated. This censorship and these stories are not normal, but they're surging because in 2023, according to the PEN America researchers, there were, as of January 6th, there were 32 active bills, more bills than days in the year, targeting these conversations. And one of those bills was SB 42 in Missouri, which moves to ban critical race theory or any theories substantially similar in grades K through 12. Mind you, critical race theory is not taught in any schools. It's a legal theory taught in graduate institutions. But what they mean to say is any conversations involving race, racism, and identity is a target under this bill. Another bill is in South Carolina, SB 3304, which moves to prohibit instruction that defines United States history as a story defined by oppression. It moves to prohibit the impartial discussion of controversial topics and of oppression faced by different groups in our society, meaning they are equating the stories of oppressors to the oppressed. They're equating those who stood up for their rights to those who worked to take them away. They're equating the groups who define this very American story with those who work to defy their existence. It's clear. This language insinuates that teaching about these topics is inherently wrong and divisive, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Teaching them early on, normalizing being kind to those who are different from you. It helps us learn lessons of the past so we do not repeat the same mistakes. It builds friendship and kinship. What it does not do is protect America or protect children. You see here, these bills insinuates to children who are Black, Asian, Indigenous, LGBTQ, who are of different faith, that their story is not a part of the American story, that they should hide who they are. The language in these bills say that if you teach the true history of America, then you must hate America. And my, is that far from the truth. You see, in this picture, I'm photographed with a Tuskegee Airman. Growing up, lessons about my Blackness and racism did not find me in the classroom. It found me in life. Many would say if he walked into an 8th grade or a 12th grade classroom, many could ridicule him for telling his story. Why are you teaching an impartial version of American history? Why are you defining America as a racist country? A patriot who fought fascism abroad and stood up against segregation at home can be ridiculed because he would simply speak his truth. You see, growing up, I saw on the TV a proud Black president, while at the same time I saw people like Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, and Eric Garner killed in the streets, people that looked just like me and my dad. The classroom was an outlet that helped me process these emotions and understand what I was experiencing. And it's the reason that I'm standing here on this stage. And as I attend a school where I am only one of 3 Black male students in my grade, and there are only roughly 3 Black faculty, I still experience these challenges. And I see up close the power of the discussions we hold and the conversations that we talk about. These stories and lessons can move the tides of nations. It can move the nation to becoming more inclusive, loving, and more accepting. However, there are those who believe that there should be one story of America that others conform to. And it's clear that that is not unanimously supported. Over 80% of Americans in a CBS YouGov poll said they do not support book bans about these topics. But that is not stopping a flurry of legislative and executive actions that censors lessons of history and restricts these conversations in classrooms. Everyday people have took up arms to fight back against this issue. Teachers, often underfunded and underappreciated, testified in legislative sessions about the impacts of these laws. Librarians have created free digital websites in districts where books are banned so students can read banned books. And organizations like PEN America keep track of these laws across many different states. Gen Z and students, they went to the ballot box in record numbers in 2022. And in states facing the harshest bans, they stood up, they spoke out, and they walked out, for all students, no matter their identity. And that right there is not a weak generation in my mind, as many like to say. But that is not enough. Our nation's journalists and leaders must challenge the narratives about our identity and our education that goes unchallenged. And those who support these book bans and the censorship of our voices must find the empathy within themselves to see the consequences of these laws. Because our stories matter. Our stories matter. And our love is stronger than hate. Our unity is stronger than division. And our education is stronger than fear. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie stood on a stage just like this one and told us about the danger of a single story. And we cannot let the voices in our country be silenced. It matters to the kid with dark skin who looks in the mirror and wonders if that can cost him his life. It matters to the girl who walks in the room as the only one and hears the power of her voice restricted. It matters to the student with a disability who battles non-inclusive spaces. And it matters to all these people. It does. You see, our nation's leaders must take up and stand up for our education, or we can watch democracy wither away. Banning these books and these critical lessons prevents us from being the best that we can be. It creates division and fear. It leads to acts of violence and allows hate to fester. So we must all lift our voices and tell our stories and wake this country up, because we will forever be stronger, united in our differences, than we are divided in our love of one another, in our fear of one another. Thank you.
Have you ever wondered about what happened during the million years of human evolution? To close off this night, our final speaker, Karry Kim, a sophomore at St. Mark's School from Seoul, South Korea, will take you on a unique journey through evolution.
Hi, everyone. Now, if there's one thing I love to do, I love to stand in front of the mirror and just stare at myself. My face, my hair, my arms, my legs. I twirl around to get a good view of every single piece of my body. And every time I do this, I'm proud to say that one question sparks up in my head. How am I so perfect in every way? No, I don't mean this in the way that you probably think I do. I mean, I love myself and I think I look amazing, but that's not the gist of the story today. What I mean is, how did nature create this masterpiece whose 78 organs, 206 bones, 600 muscles, and 7 trillion nerves all work in coordination to keep it alive? Who in the world crafted my brilliant brain, a structure packed with 86 billion little cells that communicate with each other to control the rest of my body? Now, just the mere fact that I, as a human being, stay standing and alive is a source of astonishment for me. Don't get me wrong, this is not me being narcissistic about my bodily functions. It's rather my genuine awe in how us humans came about in our effective yet ridiculously intricate form when there was no bioengineer, nor chemist, nor architect behind this amazing creation. So that's my question. How did the perfect humans emerge? Well, the short answer to this question lies in the theory of natural selection created by Charles Darwin. Natural selection is the process that created every single species that exists in our world now. Also called the survival of the fittest, this theory states that when an organism is born with a mutation that happens to be advantageous towards their survival, nature selects these mutations and passes them on to future generations. And when this process happens for the reproduction of many, many generations, these random genetic mutations become stuck as the genetic trait of a certain species in a certain environment. So that was the definition of natural selection. But this vague explanation makes it really hard for us to fathom how this process would have actually happened in real life. And this is why I'm going to explain this concept again through the example of the evolving human eyes. Now, why the eyes, you might ask? Well, I chose the eyes because the eye is the most amazing and awe-inspiring structure for both me and for the rest of the scientific community. So as you can see through this diagram, the eye is a very complex structure that no one, not even Charles Darwin, believed that the eye could have been created through natural selection. However, modern science provides a detailed explanation on how our amazing eyes came about through natural selection. So I'm going to take you all on a simulation that starts 4 billion years ago, when we were all eyeless creatures, until 2 billion years ago, when the first humans emerged. So basically, this means that you all are going to be the main characters of this 2 billion year long process of evolution, starting from an eyeless creature and evolving into the perfect humans. So in order to do this, I need you all to follow along with my instructions very, very carefully. First, we're going to move back in time for about 4 billion years, when we were all eyeless, single-celled organisms. Now, this means that we all looked like this, just a little cell. And we didn't have any eyes, so we were practically blind. So close your eyes and cover them with your hands. And notice how all you see is just pitch black darkness. So this is how the human eye started. Now open your eyes and take your hands off. So now that we've established this baseline for the creation of the human eyes, we are going to move forward in time to when a small mutation has happened to trigger the creation of the human eyes. So we are going to move forward in time for about a few 100 million years. And now you're the very, very distant descendants of these tiny single-celled organisms. This means that your great-grandparents, great-grandparents, great-grandparents multiplied many, many, many times over and over again were these little cells we were a few seconds ago. So we're moving through this process really quickly. But don't get too excited to evolve into humans quite yet, because you are still nowhere close to the structure of an animal. You still look like this, your distant ancestors from a few 100 million years ago. And this is because although many, many mutations have happened in the generations between you and your distant ancestors, none of these mutations were very advantageous towards your survival, so nature just never selected them. But good news is that nature is about to select something right now, because you were born with a genetic mutation that created new molecules called opsins in your body. Opsins are proteins that detect light, and they sit on a small spot concentrated on your face. So let's say it's right here. So this concentrated opsin spot serves as a light detecting spot. And now you can tell the difference between light and darkness. So now close your eyes again and cover them with your hands. But this time, take your hands off your eyes. And notice how you can slightly see light as opposed to a few 100 million years ago, when all your distant ancestors could see was just darkness. Now, open your eyes. How is this advantageous towards your survival? Well, it immediately makes it much easier for you to survive, because now you can tell this difference between day and night and track its cycle. As a result, you'll be able to survive until your age of reproduction and reproduce to pass on this opsin spot onto your offspring. Your offspring will also enjoy the benefits of these light-sensitive spots, and they'll pass this on to their offspring as well. Now, when this happens to the reproduction of many, many generations, this light-detecting spot will become stuck as the genetic trait of your species. Okay, so we have just went through the first stage of the evolution of the human eyes. And now it's time for one small mutation that brought this light-sensitive spot a little closer to the structure of the modern human eyes. Again, we're going to move forward in time for about a few 100 million years, And now you're the very, very distant descendants of these single-celled organisms. However, constant mutations in natural selection has made you evolve from this little cell into tiny sea creatures. Well, your vision has improved as well. You were born with a new genetic mutation that created a thin, transparent gel inside your light-sensitive spots. This transparent gel makes it much easier for you for light to focus on your light-sensitive spots, and now you can see the general outlines of objects. Well, obviously, this makes it much easier for you to survive because now you can actually track the outlines of your predators and escape from them before you get eaten. So now you'll survive until your age of reproduction and pass on this new transparent gel onto your offspring. Your offspring will do the same, and this transparent gel will become the genetic trait of your species. Okay, now are you ready to evolve some more? We're going to move forward in time for about a few 100 million years. And now you are the very, very distant descendants of these tiny sea creatures, which could only see the general outlines of objects. However, constant mutations in natural selection has made slight changes to the location, size, and thickness of your transparent gel, transforming it into the lens that the human eyes have in the present day. Now, this lens makes it much easier for light to focus on your light-sensitive spots, and now you can see everything. So, congratulations, your eyes have reached the basic structure of the human eyes. However, just to give you a sense of time, you are still you guessed it, fish. It would be millions of years later when you're able to escape the water and evolve into the humans we are right now. And through this process, your eyes would have to go through many more mutations in natural selection for it to adjust to the dry environment. Now, when this process becomes complete, the evolution of the human eyes is finally finished. So this time, actually, congratulations, you're humans now with human eyes. Now, I have to admit that this explanation for the evolution of the human eyes is a very simplified explanation. That was literally 2 billion years shrunken down into 7 minutes. This means that in between these successful mutations that I have highlighted throughout my simulation, there are many other, countless mutations that simply disappeared because they weren't advantageous enough for nature to select. And furthermore, for these benevolent changes, like the creation of the lens, happened through many, many multiple mutations that changed the transparent gel into the lens little by little. And just imagine how this process would have happened for the creation of every single piece of your body. Your brain, your blood vessels, all the layers of your skin, and even your toenails all went through this process of constant change over billions of generations to change a little cell into the perfect humans with human eyes. So basically, these little cells just kept mutating, and nature just kept selecting mutations that were helpful. And when these seemingly little mutations accumulated over many, many generations, they were able to create amazing things, like the perfect human from a little cell that didn't even have eyes. Now, this makes it very, very evident that perfect things can be created when you make continuous, yet small changes to an imperfect first draft. Now, this might seem like a very big leap, but I've learned the same exact lesson through learning how to properly write an essay. So, long story short, I used to absolutely hate writing essays because I tried to write the perfect essay in one sitting from just a messy brainstorming diagram. Did I have a first draft? No, because my first draft was my final draft. This meant that I spent so much time and energy trying to make my first draft perfect that by the time that I finished writing my first draft, I was so fed up with my essay that I just never went back to edit. Well, this was a very, very bad habit, and I was only able to break this habit when in my 8th grade writing class. So during this class, I was given 40 minutes to get started on a rough draft for my essay. Now, 40 minutes should have been enough time for me to finish writing my first 2 paragraphs. But by the end of the 40 minutes, I had absolutely nothing written down on my paper because I'd been searching every single website trying to find the perfect quote to use as my hook. Now, when my writing teacher saw this, she was very surprised because I'm generally a pretty good student, and she sat down with me to force me to write an actual first draft. She made me use this mediocre quote that I've just randomly found on the internet and made me keep my sentences simple instead of trying to find the perfect descriptive adjective for every single noun in the sentence. Well, you see, this was enough to drive my perfectionist brain absolutely crazy. However, despite all these explosions happening in my head, I endured it, and I wrote my first draft. But to make matters worse, my teacher once again forced me to spend many, many days editing this imperfect first draft, making small edits at a time to perfect my sentences. Now, finally, by the day that my essay was due, I'd been editing my essay for almost 2 weeks. And despite the doubt that I've had for this process, my essay turned out to be perfect. Well, this is because I finally learned the most important rule of writing, that you always need to start from a first draft, which is meant to be not perfect, and then move on to making small edits to make it better. Now, thinking about this very important lesson that I've learned through writing an analytical essay on Macbeth, my STEM-oriented brain somehow made a connection to evolution. I thought that just like how small edits make a perfect essay, cells also make one small mutation at a time. And when these small mutations pile up over long periods of time, they're able to create these perfect humans. You see, I think it's kind of funny that I've been using this stick figure to refer to a perfect human. It's clearly not, right? It doesn't have any clothes, no shoes, no nothing. But I think this makes the situation a perfect time to use the lesson that I've been telling you all throughout my whole speech. That if something isn't perfect, we can always make it perfect by making small yet continuous changes. So just like the creation of a light-sensitive spot in your cell, or the addition of a descriptive adjective into the title of your essay, we can make small changes to this stick figure to turn it into an actual human. It seems impossible, but follow along. First, I'm going to brush the hair of this stick figure. And to cover up this ugly explosion, I'm going to give this stick figure a half bun on using their hair. Okay, so now the stick figure has hair. And now time for the clothes. I love jean jackets, so I'm going to give her a white jean jacket. And for the shirt underneath, I think it should be black. Okay, good enough. Now for the pants, I would love to give her a pair of blue jeans, but we're at St. Mark's, so I think black jeans would work better. And now for the shoes. I think a pair of black sneakers would go really well with this outfit. So I'm going to give this girl a pair of black sneakers. Okay, perfect. So now this we've changed the stick figure into a structure somewhere close to a typical human of 2023. Now, look carefully. Doesn't she look a little familiar? This stick figure turned into me, an actual perfect human being. So, wow, we started from a stick figure. We put clothes on one by one, and we were able to accomplish this grand goal of turning this stick figure into a human. Now, I think that this way of achieving things, where you start from something small and then move on to making small changes to make it better, is very important when we're doing things that feel like climbing up a big, big mountain. So to put this lesson into use, I want everyone to think carefully and think of one thing that you've always wanted to do but just never started because it seemed like a mountain too high for you to climb. I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, I hope you've thought of something by now. And keep thinking about this, but promise yourself that you'll do something. It doesn't have to be big, or actually, I encourage you to do something really small to get you a little closer to this goal by the end of this week. Don't be afraid that this small start is nowhere close to the grand scale of your dreams. As I've been stating throughout my whole speech, what makes something perfect is not a perfect first draft. It's always the consistency and the quantity of the small efforts that follow that create amazing things, like the human body or a perfect essay. So just keep making small changes, and it'll take some time, but eventually they'll take you to your goal. Perhaps you'll be able to create something so perfect, just like every single one of us sitting in this room today, us humans. Thank you.
Thank you, Karry. Can we give a final round of applause to all our speakers tonight? Thank you. We also have a long list of thank yous.
Thank you to the Students' TEDx Committee for their help. Thank you to our speech and writing mentors, Mr. Corazzini, Dr. Burns, and Dr. Rousseau, for their valuable feedback. Thank you to our amazing faculty advisor, Mr. Monheim. This would not have happened without your support and mentorship.
Thank you to Mr. Boston in the booth right now for all the technical support and continuous passion. Thank you to Mr. Raznicek, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Griffin. Thank you to Mr. Cochran, Mrs. Lev, Mrs. Waters, and the communications office. Thank you to Mr. Monkiewicz and facilities. Thank you to Flick. And lastly, thank you to St. Mark's School for providing a platform and resources to make this event happen.
Organizing TEDxYouth was not a simple task, but in every step of the process, we learned valuable lessons and real-life skills. From the very beginning, we were determined to bring TED's mission to St. Mark's and have worked tirelessly to make this happen. Thank you to everyone we mentioned and to you, the audience, for your participation tonight. Thank you and have a wonderful night.